What is Freemasonry and is it compatible with Christianity? A number of months ago, I wrote a story on Fox News about the Catholics and their stance on Freemasonry, and I actually did a video on that just for fun. And it turned out it was a very popular topic. And so a few weeks ago from this recording, I did a video on whether or not Baptists thought that Freemasonry was okay from a Christian perspective. And I'll leave a link to both of those videos at the end of this one in the description. But interestingly, the Baptists said a number of things that they thought were not in concert with Christianity, but they said that if you have a clear conscience, go ahead and you can be a Mason. It's up to your conscience, which I criticize as being a strange position because they don't say that. And I got that from another book I'm going to show you here in a second, that they don't say that about things like Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons or anything like that, but they did say that about the Masons, that they have very different views and contradictory views regarding Christian claims, much like other groups. And they condemn those other groups, but they don't condemn the Masons to that extent to where they say don't be one. And I said in that video that I think that probably is because it's more political. There are just a lot of Masons in Baptist churches. There probably aren't very many Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons in Baptist churches. So, but what are the Freemasons? What do they do? And what are their beliefs? And are they consistent with Christianity? Well, in researching this topic, as I like to do with any topic, I want to look at sources, and good sources. So I have already a few sources that I had handy. Like, for example, I had this one that I had for a while. This is by Ron Rhodes. It's called Reasoning from the Scriptures with Masons. He has a lot of good books like this on reasoning from the Scriptures with Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics. I've had this for a while, and I was able to use it, thankfully, for this research. And also this one called Masonic Rights and Wrongs, an examination of Freemasonry by Stephen Tsoukalis. But I wanted to hear from the Masons themselves as well. And so some of those sources would be, and I got this right from the Masons, right from the Scottish Rite folks. So A Bridge to Light, Study in Masonic Ritual and Philosophy by Rex Hutchins, and a well-known, one of the top sources on this topic, A Comprehensive View of Freemasonry by Henry Wilson Coyle. Another book that I used a lot in this research that told me about what books do Masons value. If you're going to go and ask a Mason, who do you value as a Mason? They will give you a list. And I got this list from a book called The Secret Teachings of the Masonic Lodge, written by John Ankerberg and John Weldon. And they give a number of sources that are very important on this topic. And some of them are here, and I got these. This is some electronic sources I got on Kindle. Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite, Freemasonry. Albert Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry and the Builders, A Story and Study of Masonry. So I want to get the sources from the horse's mouth. And if you want to learn about the Masons or for anything, go to the sources, go to what the group actually is saying. The interesting thing is here that the sources don't agree on something that you would think they would agree on, and that is, what is Freemasonry? Now, in answering this topic, I'm going to go to a Mason himself, one of the top ones that is regarded as a good source, Henry Wilson Coyle, in his book, A Comprehensive View of Freemasonry. He's a Mason, okay? So what is Freemasonry? Well, he says, nobody knows what Freemasonry is. Or if that statement be deemed too strong, at least no one has been able to demonstrate that he knows the answer to the question. See, the problem with making a definition of something is that you don't want to let in things that shouldn't be in there, but you don't want to exclude things that should be in there. So you don't want a too broad or a too narrow definition. So while Coyle says no one knows what Freemasonry is, he does give some characteristics of what he thinks Masonry is. Freemasonry is an oath-bound fraternal order of men deriving from the medieval fraternity of operative Freemasons. That means people who actually were Freemasons and worked with stones, adhering to many of their ancient charges, laws, customs, and legends, loyal to the civil government under which it exists, inculcating moral and social virtues, by symbolic application of the working tools of the stonemasons, and by allegories, lectures, and charges, the members of which are obligated to observe principles of brotherly love, equality, mutual aid and assistance, secrecy, confidence, have secret modes of recognizing each other as Masons when abroad in the world, and meet in lodges, each governed somewhat automatically by a master, assisted by wardens, where applicants under particular inquiry into their mental, moral, and physical qualifications are formally admitted into the society in secret ceremonies based in part on old legends of the craft. So there's a working definition, even though he says no one knows what a Mason is, which is very interesting coming from a Mason. The issue, though, with Freemasonry is it is not a monolithic, universally led in a great hierarchy where you've got one person like the Pope, for example, in the Catholic Church that governs all the bishops and everybody under him. So the Masons are run by local lodges. They do have I guess you'd say, an informal structure of authority that they would adhere to, but each lodge kind of is autonomous, at least to a certain extent, to do what they will. But there are general guidelines that they have to adhere to. So you may get one Mason who says one thing and one Mason who says something else. The interesting thing is, if you read these sources, these primary sources, is that Masons themselves will say that a lot of what we learn in Masonic symbols and rites and everything are secret, even to Masons, until you get to a certain degree, namely the 33rd degree in the Scottish Rite and the equivalent of that in the York Rite. So you just by being a Mason does not mean that you are just automatically let into all the secrets. You're admitted into the Blue Lodge as an entered apprentice, and you work your way up to a Master Mason in the Blue Lodge in those three levels. But you don't learn the deep secrets of Freemasonry until you reach much higher levels. And it's even debated as to whether or not the Scottish Rite and the York Rite actually are part of the Masons. At least it has been debated, even among Masons. So when did the Masons start? Well, there are several views on this. They're not exactly in agreement as to when they started. Some will put the start of the Masons all the way back to the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve were given aprons. You know, Masons, they wear aprons when they first start being let into the Blue Lodge. They're given aprons, and it has symbolic meaning. And they say that the aprons or the skins that Adam and Eve had are similar to these Masonic aprons. So some will say that it goes back all the way to the Garden of Eden, and others say no, it goes back to Solomon, who was really the original Mason. There's a lot of and even beyond that, there are other aspects of Masonry that are said to be tied into, this is one of the criticisms of Christians, tied into mystical religions, especially Egypt, and places around that have a lot of mystical and the mystery religions and pagan religions like that are tied into this. And while Masonry might not be tied back to all that, they do take many of their symbols, the gods they talk about, and the various practices from these mystery religions like the ones from Egypt, for example. They talk a lot about Horus and just various Egyptian gods and religions, and the various ones as well outside of Egypt. This is one of the criticisms of Christians, is that they're bringing these mystical religions that have no part in true religion. So, but formally, the Masons began in 1717 in the First Grand Lodge in London, and then came to the United States a little over a decade after that, about a decade and a half after that. The big question that it doesn't seem like Masons agree on, again, another question they don't agree on, is it a religion? Let's look again at Henry Wilson Coyle, again, a Mason from their own works, and see what he says on page 215 of A Comprehensive View of Freemasonry. He says, many repeat analytically such statements as that Freemasonry is a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. And Freemasonry is a progressive science taught by degrees only. And Freemasonry is not religion, but is emphatically a religion's handmaid, imagining that they have defined Freemasonry. But all of these, if true, are but aphorisms. Moreover, they are not quite true. The morality of Freemasonry is not veiled at all, but is set forth in quite clear English. In the ritual, although it is illustrated by symbols, Freemasonry is not a science, and if it is progressive, then a large segment of the craft are wrong in thinking it quite fixed and permanent in its doctrine. He goes on to say, Freemasonry is undoubtedly religion, though simple and creedless, but what is meant by religion's handmaid is very uncertain. He says a definition to be such must be mutually inclusive and exclusive, that it must be described, it must describe a thing so as to include all its characters and exclude everything that is not a character of it. Now, so he does say unequivocally that Freemasonry is a religion, but do Masons agree with that? No, they do not. So let's look at Pike's work, Moral and Dogma. He says emphatically, Masonry is not a religion. He who makes of it a religious belief falsifies and denaturalizes it. The Brahmin, the Jew, the Mohammedan, the Islam, Muslim, the Catholic, Protestant, each professing his peculiar religion, sanctioned by the laws, by time, by climate, must needs retain it and cannot have two religions, Masonry and whatever that other one would be. For the social and sacred laws adapted to the usages, manners, and prejudices of particular countries are the works of men. But is it consistent with that? Let's see. But Masonry teaches and has preserved in their purity the cardinal tenets of the primitive faith, which underlie and are the foundation of all religions. He goes on to say every Masonic lodge is a temple of religion, and its teachings are instruction in religion. I don't know how it cannot be a religion, but it's a temple of religion and instruction in religion. And also, this is the true religion revealed to the ancient patriarchs, which Masonry has taught for many centuries and which it will continue to teach as long as time endures. Further, Masonry propagates, he says, no creed except its own most simple and sublime one, that universal religion taught by nature and by reason. Its lodges are neither Jewish, Muslim, nor Christian temples. It reiterates the precepts of morality of all religions. So that is basically the tension we see with, is Freemasonry a religion? Some say yes, some say no. And even when Pike, who says no, he goes on to really seem to say yes, because he says that all the lodges are temples of religion and they're giving instruction in religion. So I think he undercuts his denial of saying it's not a religion when he goes on to describe it as inherently religious, which is very interesting. But what is a religion? I used to teach survey of world religions at a secular school, and it is difficult to define religion because there are religions that there are belief systems that are categorized as religions that do not have a deity, such as Buddhism, Confucianism. And if you want to define a religion as having a deity, then those systems would not count. And some will say, well, it shouldn't count, religious philosophies. But typically speaking, those are seen. If you pick up a standard book on religion off the shelf, you're going to see Buddhism and Confucianism and all these different things like that are Eastern but don't have a deity. Some books, like the one I ended up using for that course, described religion as a human response to a perceived ultimate, which is very broad. It wanted to, as Henry Wilson Coyle wanted to say, exclude things that should not be part of the definition while including things that should be. Yeah, normally we're going to have a perceived ultimate with religion, and we're going to have a human transformation, hopefully because of that. But the objection to that definition might be, well, football could be an ultimate to somebody. So it's difficult to define religion. But typically, religion is also defined as belief in God, the use of symbols, the use of rituals, the idea of an afterlife. And by all counts, Masonry does those things. They do believe in a God, even though they think that God is so unknown that you really can't put a fine-tuned description to what he is. Is he the Christian kind of God? Is he more of the Hindu view of God? And they say, well, that we're not going to put a definition on that. So they describe God as the grand architect of the universe, which is when we see their symbol, the G with the compass and a square, that has to do with the great geometrician in geometry and the great architect of the universe. And so one of the claims that Christians make against Masonry is that, yes, you have to hold to a view of God in Masonry to be a Mason, except in France, because they are allowing Masons in France to become Masons who are atheistic. Now, France is a very atheistic country, has been for a long time, but there's probably some discussions among Masons as to whether or not they are real Masons or not. But France has allowed atheists in, but as a general rule, you cannot be a Mason without believing in a higher power or a deity. But whatever that deity is left up to the specific Mason. You can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Hindu, you can be anything you want, as long as you recognize there is a higher power. So they also practice rituals. They also have a lot of symbolism. They actually draw a lot from the Kabbalah and the occultic practices, where occult here means hidden, where there's a lot of hidden meaning. For example, in the scriptures, they will use the Bible, for example, as one of their texts. And we'll see in a few minutes what they think of the Bible, but they think that there is a hidden view, a hidden meaning of the text in the scripture. Ron Rhodes, in the book I mentioned earlier, says that if Freemasonry is not a religion, then it is certainly the most religious non-religion I have encountered in my 25 years of religious studies. And I would agree with that. It seems that Freemasonry is a religion. In fact, if you look at their text, and I'm not going through everything that they're saying, I don't have time for that, but if you look at their texts, their own sources, they describe themselves as temples of religion, as instructions in religion, as using symbol, as using ritual, belief in afterlife. And we'll see what that means for them here in a few minutes. So that's their view of God and their view of religion, is that their view of God in the Freemasonry circles, is that you have to believe in a God. Doesn't have to be any specific God. Now, what about their view of the Bible? As I mentioned, they do hold to the Bible as one of their sacred texts. It does not seem to be inspired or inerrant in the way that Christians think of. It is said to be one of many books, like the Quran, like the Vedas, the Hindu religion, and anything else like that. As part of their furniture, they use as part of the furniture and the temples, which is, again, another. These are all criticisms from Christians. They don't hold the Bible as true scripture, as inspired, authoritative. They use it as it's one of many other books and just part of the furniture in their lodges. Their view of Jesus, much the same way. They think of Jesus as a great person, as a great moral teacher. They do not view him as divine. They do not believe that he is God per se, but like the Hindus would say, he is a great moral teacher. He is someone that they would want to emulate, but he isn't divine. They think he was a mere human. So they have a radically different view of Jesus than Christians do. Now, what about their view of salvation? Well, for one thing, they deny original sin. Now, there are some in the Christian circles who deny exactly what original sin is, but they don't think, as a general rule, that humans are really bad people, that we make mistakes and we do things that are wrong, but we're not sinful in the sense that the Bible describes us as being sinful. Certainly not in, like, Romans 5 would talk about us as having the sin nature of Adam passed down to us, where many Christians will describe that as original sin. One of their sources, this is going to be Raymond Lee Allen, from one of their own sources called Tennessee Craftsman, or the Masonic Textbook, 4th edition, says this: in all ages, The lamb has been deemed an emblem of innocence. He therefore who wears the lamb skin as a badge of masonry is continually reminded of that purity of life and conduct which is necessary to obtain admittance into the celestial lodge above, that is heaven, where the supreme architect of the universe, that is God, resides. So this is their own text talking about that we really, if we do good works and we live good lives, we will achieve purity. And it's through that we really attain salvation. Pike says in his Morals and Dogma, step by step, men must advance toward perfection. And each Masonic degree is meant to be one of those steps. So as you go up in the degrees in Masonry, assuming that the Scottish Rite and the York Rite are part of them, and they generally are seen to be part of the Freemasonry, you learn more, you learn more of the secrets, you learn more of what you have to do, what the truth is in Masonry, what they really believe, what the underlying meaning of all these symbols are. The symbols and the rituals, they become more laid out, more explained, more meaningful the higher you go up. So you may have Masons who say, well, we don't believe that. That's not really taught, especially if they're charged with something like being occultic or even satanic. They say, we don't really believe that. And many Masons don't believe that. Many Masons don't really understand from what even Masons say. They say that you don't really learn these deep secrets until you get up to, say, the 33rd degree. And we've had Masons come out of Masonry. Another person that I would look to for that, who was a Mason, his name is Jack Harris, who has a book called Freemasonry, the Invisible Cult. Now, he was a Mason. If I'm remembering, he was a High Mason, and said that I think he was a worshipful master. There's another criticism of Christians is that these high leaders of the lodges are called worshipful masters. And what you have to do as a Mason to take on the entered apprentice of the Blue Lodge is you have to say, I'm living in darkness and need the light of Masonry. And so the critique there is, how can a Christian claim to be living in darkness and want the light of Masonry? How can that happen? How can a person claim to be living in darkness when he's supposed to be in the light of Christ, and then say he's living in darkness and he needs the light of Masonry? Well, that's what you have to do. And so these people who have come out of Masonry and become Christians, like Harris, tell us what really goes on, what these symbolic meanings really are, and then how that's dangerous or even antithetical to Christianity. So we could spend, and one problem I had with this topic is I feel like I could spend forever researching this, and I was getting analysis paralysis with this topic. So I had to just do this video, do this talk. If you're interested in this topic, read those sources I gave you. I'll put some links in the description. Read those sources, both for people who are actually in Masons or were in Masons, and who are giving you the information from the Masonic mouth. You want to get it from the horse's mouth. You don't want to get all the information from whatever you're studying, in this case, Masons. So can you be a Freemason and be a Christian? I don't think that it's a good thing, because if you have to say you're living in darkness, if you have to agree with a group who have these very hidden meanings, these occultic meanings of the scriptures, who want to deny that the Bible is really authoritative, who want to deny that Jesus is divine, that's not really an organization I would want to be associated with as a Christian. Now, there's a big draw to the Masons, because it's interesting. These secret societies, we want to be on the inside. We want to be part of the, these secret clubs and know what they're doing and be connected. And many people there are just there for the network, the business contacts, have something to do, whatever. And they do a lot of good work. They really do. They do a lot of good work. They do a lot of work with hospitals, burn victims. I have family who do that kind of things, those kind of things. They do a lot of good work. I'm not denigrating that. The question is based on ideals and based on teachings and beliefs, can a Christian consistently be a Christian and be a Mason? Well, the Masons clearly teach things that are antithetical to Christianity. The nature of God, the denial of the divinity of Jesus, the denial of scriptures being inspired and inerrant, the notion that we're not really inherently sinful, the notion of our salvation going to the celestial lodge being based on works, and in all these things, calling, saying you're living in darkness, having to call someone a worshipful master, and all these different kind of things. And they may have answers to, well, that doesn't mean this or that, but it seems to be a lot of religious discussion and a lot of religious terminology about it. And if you look really closely to what they're saying, the ones that are coming out of this, some of them are actually saying that Freemasonry is really veiled Satanism. And you really get into Satanism as you get into the higher degrees. I will leave a link in the description to that video. It's a long video. I think it's 5 hours. In fact, I watched the whole thing one night. It's a five and a half hour video, and it's by a Mason who got out and is charging that Masonry really is Satanism, because they do all these things that are just they do these things that are really satanic, but they're done in the name and the cloak of Masonry. So I hope this was enlightening and interesting for you. If nothing else, hopefully you've been motivated to do more research, get some of these resources, think about it. If you've got family who are in the Masons or friends and you want to get them out, be strategic about these things, pray for them. You're not probably going to get them out quickly. In fact, this book that I got, Masonic Rights and Wrongs, is written by somebody who, his dad was a Mason and he wanted to learn about Masonry and get his dad out. And his dad, after a while, I don't know how long, he did come out of Masonry and he became a Christian. But don't be argumentative. Try to give them something to think about. Pray for them. If you're a Masonry, consider what that really is and what that means, and if it's really consistent. I don't think we can condone it, like the Baptist report said from 1992, I think it was, that if it's up to your own conscience. I think that there are things that are detrimental and contradictory to Christian teaching, and that Christians really should not be part of this organization. As interesting and alluring as it is, I think that we should understand that it's teaching things that are antithetical to Christianity and that are very likely evil and possibly satanic. So leave a comment. If you have a comment, ask a question. I hope this was interesting and enlightening for you. And until then, I will see you next time.